Yes, everyone, welcome back to GNS episode 17 or something. Christ knows. Something like that. Anyway, we're going to do a continuation on the Q&A that we kind of vaguely touched on last time. And yeah, just kind of see where things are. So we spoke about commercial gyms holding people back.
That was a good question. Whoever asked that.
A good one. Shout out Alex Hegg. He sent me another one, but he said he sent over DMs, so now I've got to go to my DMs. Cheers, Alex. I gotta find it. Oh my days, mate. I've got to fill the air while I talk. La-di-da-di-da. Right, we're almost there. Okay. So his question is, with so much new data constantly being added to the public forum, do you find it difficult to manage client understanding of what are the right decisions when it comes to how to train? Also, how often do you find yourself adapting your own training based on new data, basically?
The short answer to that, I'll go first. But the short answer to that, I think, is no. I think staying on top of the literature is mandatory, I think, especially for high-level coaches like we are doing right now. However, part of being a fantastic coach is adapting your language to the level of client that you have. So there's this thing called layman's terms, which is basically explaining it to someone who doesn't have the same understanding to you. So if I was to explain a really high-level concept in high-level terminology to a client that isn't really at that level, it's completely useless to them. Whether you apply that concept or not, that strikes as you as a coach. You know, there are some clients who I have who are, more beginner to intermediate, who I apply more high-level like coaching strategies. However, their understanding of that doesn't need to be anywhere near as great as mine, because they just need to execute it, and it's my job to make them execute to the best of their ability. Now, if the client is perspicacious and are wondering what the concepts behind it is, the physiology or the mechanics, whatnot, I'm more than happy to explain it. But for most clients, they just want to crack on with it and they don't want to get the brunt of it. Now, in terms of all this new data coming out, bodybuilding has been around for a while, and there are certain things that just do work. Like, I'm sure Jack can agree with me on this, but when I first started going to the gym, I didn't really struggle to grow muscle. Like, even if you don't train with perfect form, your nutrition isn't immediately on point, if you train hard enough, you will make gains. Intensity, in my opinion at least, is the number one factor whether you are going to make progress in the gym or not. If you are training hard enough, you will make progress. And I think, as a coach, we only really have to facilitate changes when it's necessary. For example, right now, my training is the best it's ever been. And do I need to make changes to my training? No, fuck no, it works. Why would I need to change something that works,
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing to kind of underpin everyone's understanding is, if you stick to something and I think people need to forget the idea of ideal. I'm not going to say the O word, I hate it, but this hypothetical ideal doesn't really exist. It's more like a range of things. It's you want to know the best side delt exercise. Okay, well, it might be a cable lateral or a cable Y raise or a machine lateral or a dumbbell lateral. It could be any of them. It might be all four. And it's okay, how much volume should I do for side delts? It might be 8 sets, it might be 9, it might be 10, it might be 11, or it's all 4. Doesn't matter. When you get into the minutia, it's you get real diminishing returns. So I think the key thing to understand is there's never going to be a perfect ideal, and if you chase it forever, you're going to drive yourself nuts. As long as you've got something that's good enough, that's sticking to that consistently is what is going to drive progress. Because like you said, intensity and performance are the key drivers of progress. If you're constantly swapping things out, then you're never going to get anywhere. There's there's an Instagram post floating around that's all of the different things that people who are overly study focused, I'm not going to say science based because I wouldn't call them science based, I would say it's overly study focused. If people are overly study focused, constantly swapping out what the best chest fly is, it's if you compare that to someone in the same period of time who just did a chest fly, they're going to have actually progressed their chest because it was 30 weeks. And it's if you constantly changed your meso around because of misinterpretations of meta-analyses or whatever, or poor study design, then you're going to be constantly chopping and changing. So no, I think with us, we don't make a lot of changes. We're very tuned in with what we know works for us, and obviously, like, generally our understanding is very, very good. I think, I mean, feel free to kind of jump in here, but I would say usually studies don't really tell us anything that we kind of don't already, to an extent, like, suspect or know. You know what I mean? Like, it's like our understanding of these things overall kind of goes beyond like what just studies pull up. Like, for example, like lengthened focus, right? Where people are like, okay, the lengthened range gives equal to full range of motion. It's like, okay, well, I mean, that makes sense because the contractile portion is what kind of dies off quickest. Like, so if you're constantly trying to challenge that throughout a session, your ability to put mechanical tension through your body is going to just diminish. So therefore, if you do go a bit into lengthened, you can do that a bit longer. But equally, we need to bear in mind that that doesn't mean that we're then going to never use things like a bilateral or a contraction focus. Because again, me and Camille also understand that from a joint perspective, there's still benefit from training the contraction a hell of a lot, from a tendon perspective especially. And also there is in terms of like flexibility, enjoyment, and also just not chronically fatiguing yourself for no reason. And we also know that if you progress those things, you're going to make progress. So no, I don't think, I think studies kind of give you an idea of like maybe what you could lean towards, or I think the best way I'd phrase it, and then I'll kind of we've both monologued, I'll try and like make it a bit more back and forthy, but I think the key thing that I take away from studies is not really what to lean towards, but probably more what to lean away from. So
hugely.
Like, if it's like, okay, mid to lengthened mainly matters. If someone tells me, hey, when I go all the way up into the contraction of a calf raise, my feet start to shake and, you know, it throws me off a bit and it starts to hurt a little bit, I'll be like, okay, just don't do that then. Just cut it off. And I'll be like, I feel pretty comfortable making that decision. You know, so it's one of those things where like, I'm not going to overly lean towards everything that it's saying, but if I see context for it, it kind of gives me a good, if I've got a client in front of me where I think they're going to benefit, it gives me good context to maybe be like, okay. But again, I think the main thing that underpins everything is performance. If you stick to consistent varied lifts and you consistent varied fucking hell, as in the same lifts, but those lifts aren't just like the same pattern over and over again. Like, don't just do the same exercise like every single day, because you're probably going to piss off your joints a bit. But if you stick to a good basis of lifts, always run them, always progress them, you're going to find it very hard not to build tissue. Do you ever find it difficult to manage?
Hold on. Before you continue, I wanted to quickly touch upon what you said. There was two specific things I like. One of my biggest pet peeves that come in terms of like coaches. So first one is abstract warriors. There are people who claim to read literature and they're like, oh yeah, no, I've read all these studies, but they'll click on a study, they'll read the abstract, and I'll be like, oh yeah, no, this study said this outrageous claim, so it must be true. And that pisses me off because, you know, as a uni student now finishing my fourth year, obviously I had my dissertation, you know, actually having to analyze literature, read it through, etc., etc. Just because a study claims something doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Like you said, there are lots of like methodological issues, you know, like funding issues, etc., etc., that could increase the bias of the potential paper, and people don't take that into account. The actual quality of the data itself needs to be factored in alongside the point that it's actually trying to make. And the other thing that is my biggest pet peeve of all time is like when I'm scrolling through Instagram and I see like, oh yeah, this is the best exercise to grow your lat there, or this is the best exercise to grow your lats. Because the matter of the fact is, it's simply not true. You can't claim that there is one single exercise that is universally good for growing a muscle group for everyone, period. Every single person has different structural differences. Every single different person is, you know, different afferent nerves from the muscles that send different signals. For one person, a move might be like burning. Another person might perceive it as a stretching sensation. Another person might not feel it at all, right? So there are so many individual differences that need to be factored into account. For example, one that really pissed me off recently was a bent over barbell row. This guy was claiming that bent over barbell row was a terrible back exercise, and I was like, is it? It's fantastic for growing your erectors, and if performed correctly, can also provide a lot of stimulus to your lats or your upper back. It's about how you execute the exercise and who you are. How effective you make an exercise is based on the individual, not the exercise itself. I think every single exercise in the gym has a purpose dependent on the individual itself.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, you know, I think it's very easy to get into like minutia, and I only really get into minutia. I was thinking about this today. I was like, the only time I really get into like minutia is like injury detail, right? So if someone's like got if someone's doing a specific pattern or group of patterns and they're like, oh, this is painful, and I'm like, okay, a lot of the patterns that would be slightly more Terry's major biased seem to give you some kind of pain. Cool. Now I might go into, let's see if we can maybe bias away from there, or let's see if we can maybe start to bias towards something else. Like a classic example, I've had a few in the past, like bouts of like shoulder issues where like more abducted pronated grips of like rows and pull downs gave me issue. Like basically a lot of upper back work. I get like little scap tweaks, little kind of shoulder tweaks. I'd be like, okay, I'll just make more of my rowing movements more lat dominant. It gives me zero pain and it allows me to progress everything. And then I might be like, okay, how much scapular motion can I get out of my lat dominant rows to see if I can train like scapular musculature. But again, it's not something that I'm overly going to focus on unless one, injured, or two, like very specific goals for someone. Maybe it's like judges feedback, or they're like, I want to grow my lats, and I'm like, why? And they're like, I just really want to grow my lats, and I'll be like, okay, fine, we can do that. Or someone's like, I really want lower lats, and I'll be like, okay, weird but sure, I'm not going to tell you that your goals are wrong. Like if you want that, let's go for it. But you know, you just kind of don't need to go into that too much. Like one way that I often program is kind of based on like movement weaknesses from like a injury prevention and a hypertrophy focus. Like my back is decent. I've got a decent back. My freestanding rowing, like my barbell row, awful, horrific. My chest supported row matches my back, but my like barbell row is like embarrassing, really, really bad. So I was like, okay, one, I suck at this movement to the degree where I'm like, okay, that's almost concerning from like a anatomical perspective of like why do I struggle so much with this? So I'm almost like, okay, maybe potentially like some weakness in my erectors, maybe some like a weakness across like the stability of my spine, who knows, whatever. So one, I'm like, okay, let's embrace this thing I suck at because it's good from an injury perspective. And the other one is I'm thinking, okay, I could easily double what I'm doing on the barbell bent over row over time. What is that degree of performance and stimulus going to do for my back? Like me getting on a prime row and going from like 6 or 7 plates to like 8 or 9 is cool. It's going to take a fucking while. Whereas like going from like 2 plates to a 3-plate barbell bent over row is not stupid or unrealistic, and hopefully shouldn't take me too long. Also, I kind of suck at hinging, so I was like, okay, it kind of mimics that hinged position. It gives me a bit more confidence there. And since I've incorporated them, yeah, my hinging's improved as well. I'm like, cool, nice, sweet. So again, I kind of like, I think a lot of people get caught up in like, oh, this exercise sucks, and I think it's good to embrace patterns that like you don't normally get to do, because you know, if you suddenly decide that you're going to start axial loading, or if you're suddenly going to start to involve your erectors in something and they're not used to load, and you've got a really strong upper to mid back and your erectors are just like non-existent, they just aren't strong at all, you might run into, you know, potentially some pretty devastating injuries if you then start to like flex your lumbar spine a little bit too much, your chest comes off the pad a little bit too much when doing like a chest supported row, you know. Whereas if you've got the ability to be strong at a variety of movements, you're going to have a pretty well-rounded and developed physique, and a pretty safe one. So it's always worth, like, I would say everyone should get a rotation of some exercises of like stuff that they're kind of crap at, you know. Like the way that I've built my chest and my upper chest in particular is I didn't pick pressing I was good at, I picked pressing that I sucked at, and was like, right, how can I get better at this? Like the discrepancy between my overhead to my flat pressing was huge. So I was like, okay, let's just do a lot of overhead pressing and some high incline pressing, get decent at that. I did. My upper pec grew a lot, my front delts grew a lot, and I was like, sweet, cool. So I'd always say it's worth like trying to rinse those movements that you kind of shit at, you know?
Yeah, people, when you get to a certain level of lifting, people view being weak at a movement as a bad thing. But if you truly understand what hypertrophy, performance, and, you know, the goal to progress and exercise, Now, if I find an exercise or movement pattern that I'm really weak at, I'm like, there is so much room for me to progress that, because
Yeah.
I have to, with the level physique that we both have now, we have to use a large amount of load in order to further create stimulus, right? If I then am given a blessing and I'm like, oh, there's this exercise where I'm like 30-40% weaker compared to all my other lifts, I'm like, one, it's going to be so much easier on my neurological system. It's not going to be anywhere near as taxing. Two, it's going to be really, really easy to progress if I really nail that movement. And three, if hypertrophy is performance based and I run that exercise up, it's going to be so much safer on my joints because I'm not using anywhere near as load, and I'm going to get way more progressions out of it. And this is why I think it is important to cycle some exercises between phases, not just from a joint and safety perspective, but also from a performance perspective. Especially as natural athletes, there are certain exercises where you just run it to the upper echelon, and you might go into a store or anything like that. And if you simply cannot progress that exercise any further, and you're already using a significant amount of load, it's fucking you up week in, week out, and potentially even taken away from your other exercises. Just swap out for a movement pattern that you're really bad at and get good at it.
Yeah, I think I think even just from an injury perspective, just having a degree of like all-round strength is good, because if you know that you can't, like, if you know that you suck at a certain pattern, then if it's a particular movement plane, then that tells you, like, if you're like, oh yeah, I suck overhead at like pulling and pushing, it's like, okay, well, that tells you that there's probably, there's a reason that you suck at that. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is associated with biasing certain musculature or certain joint positions. So if you want to grow, you should probably tap into that a little bit, because your physique is likely, it's very rare that you have like a very well proportioned and balanced physique with so many like glaring strength issues. But equally as well, if it's like a free weighted movement, it's like, okay, you lack stability, potentially that could be a real concern from an injury perspective. But you're not always going to be put into favorable positions that you want to be. You can't always pick like where you end up, particularly if like something goes wrong with a certain lift, or even just in day-to-day life. So if you're in a position where you know that you carry a good degree of strength, there'll always be differences between patterns, but if you carry a good degree of strength across a variety of patterns, it's going to be very, very hard to have weaknesses or run into issues or injuries. And I think even when we look at lifts from like a major muscle perspective, we're like, okay, pushing is pushing, it's pretty damn similar. It's like, okay, but what about minor muscles? What about those muscles that people tend not to think about? What about those ones that like you see so frequently flared up in clinic? And like, if you think about, if you want to stay injury free, basically, if you're strong at everything and it doesn't hurt, it's pretty damn hard to get injured at anything. Whereas people start to run into issues when they're like lifting things they shouldn't be and causing themselves issues. One of the things Heg pointed out, one of the questions was, do you find it difficult to kind of communicate with clients, particularly like the level of information out there on social media?
Oh, good question. Like I said, it's quite similar to the last one in the sense that we use layman terms. Obviously, if I am, understanding a piece of information, especially with like rehabilitation, physiology, exercise prescription, that sort of thing, I try to explain it and dumb it down to the best of my ability. And you kind of tailor it towards the knowledge of the client slash coach, right? So we also coach coaches and we coach clients. If I'm explaining something to a coach, I'm going to use slightly different language than if I'm using it to a client slash athlete, right? So, for example, if I'm explaining rehabilitation to a coach, I'll be like, yeah, with your clients, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. They might understand a bit of anatomy and physiology, so I'll use the name of the muscles, the attachments, maybe, etc., etc. However, with a client, I might, just tailor it towards them and be like, okay, no, just focus on, doing this movement, this stretch, etc., etc. So I think it's very, very important to be tailored towards what the actual person needs. And also, if they are inquisitive and they want to know more, then they're always welcome to ask. You can always say like, I've explained it this way. If you want it in more detail, you're welcome to ask me. I can record you a little Loom video, etc., etc. So you kind of, like I said, I think we say this every single pod, but like being tailored towards your client and their needs, it's just basically bread and butter of what being a coach is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing about like, it really just, like you said, comes down to your ability to communicate. Like, if someone is wanting to implement something, either it's a good idea or it's a bad idea, and either way you have to communicate why. That's kind of your job. Don't just be like, yeah, sure. Because I think too many coaches maybe would just be like, yeah, sure, and then it's like, okay, you don't really build much trust. Because imagine you go to someone who's meant to be a specialist, and you're like, oh, hey, what about this thing you didn't mention? And they're like, oh yeah, that's brilliant. And you're like, what would you have done if I hadn't brought that up? You know, even if you just say like, yeah, sure, we can do that. I mean, it's not really much of an upgrade on what we're doing at the minute, but if you want to do it, we can. Then they're like, oh, okay, cool, I wasn't missing out. Whereas if you say like, yes, absolutely, that's brilliant, they're just going to feel like they're missing out, and the only reason they got it is because of luck. So it comes down to your ability to communicate, and I think, like you said, you just have to break it down into layman's terms. You just have to explain it in something that they understand. Like everyone who's ever been coached by me knows that I love an analogy, and it's because you can kind of, it's not great from, like, I wouldn't ever really educate coaches with analogies too much because they kind of oversimplify systems. But for the sake of making a point, and for the sake of like not going into caveat after caveat after caveat with like a lifestyle client or a general coaching question, it's nice to be able to use analogies to kind of describe what you mean. So for example, like I had a question of someone who was like, oh, I'm following the food and I'm not gaining weight, maybe I need a diet break. And if we're getting into the weeds, it's like, yeah, fatigue can occur, and like pulling down food and then like holding for a little bit can influence your appetite. Like generally like repatterning your food, giving you a lower amount of food, improving your timing, and then your timings can help with your hunger signaling. Yeah, absolutely, that can play a role. But I kind of just simplified it down as like, you're a car, you have this size engine, you need this much petrol. Us taking a diet break is like not driving the car for a week. You come right back to the car, it's going to need the exact same thing to get going. Like when your car runs out of petrol, you take it to the station and you get more. You don't just leave it for a week and hope that the tank shrinks in size, because that's not going to happen, right? So you taking a week off of gaining isn't going to mean that you need less food to gain. It's just going to mean that you'll hold body weight, and then if you eat the same food you eat now, you'll plateau, and then you'll still need to eat. If we need an extra 300 calories to grow, you're still going to need that afterwards. Nothing's going to change. And it's like simplifying down that system to basically like, no, you do just need to have more food, and you do just need to follow it a little bit better. And like, we've not been pushing long enough to have a diet break, like things like that. It's a nice way of kind of clarifying it, because they're like, okay, I get it. So I do just need more food. I think particularly because depending on who you talk to, sometimes people have very interesting ideas about the human body. They view it as like, particularly, I think hormones kind of mess with people, as in like the concept of them. Because, if you're talking about like, humans are quite like simple systems in terms of energy. It's like in and out, in and out. And then people get confused because they're like, yeah, but there's all kinds of hormone interactions. And it kind of feels like the human body is some magical, mystical thing that has a million billion overlaying factors. And it's like, yeah, the reason that you can't gain weight is because you need a detox, and like you're just too stressed, and like you can't gain weight because like your metabolism's out of whack because the moon's in alignment with Neptune or whatever. And it's like, it's easy to get like people who have that mindset because they just kind of don't understand it. And it's like, no, you just like you just need more food than I anticipated, and like there's not really much I can do about that because we took a very good guess at what you needed and it just wasn't enough, and that's okay. You just need to eat more. I'm sorry. Sometimes you need to eat less. We don't always get it right the first time. We can only really take a good guess because there's a lot of things that go into how much food you need to eat. But anyway, like kind of, sometimes explaining that to someone can be a little bit messy, and they're like, no, there's got to be more to it than that. So if I kind of simplify it down to an analogy, it's like I tend to use like a bank account or a car or something when it comes to energy. It makes things a lot easier for people to grasp. It's like, okay, no, it's just in and out. I think particularly if you use like a mechanical idea of the body, it's like, okay, people kind of, understand it. Or using like an analogy of like a pet, it's like, okay, your dog needs to gain weight. What do? Feed him more and walk him less. Cool, right? I'm going to feed you more because we can't really walk less, and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. So even just small little things go a long way. But yeah, it all comes down to a long-winded answer. I said it wasn't in a monologue, but I did. It all comes down to like your ability to communicate and speak to that client at that level. And equally, you don't need to gatekeep knowledge. If they're after it, just give it to them. But sometimes people just want like an answer that they're happy with, you know.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, brother. Right. Next questions. So we've got 100 gorilla-sized men versus 100 gorillas. Who's winning?
Obviously, the gorillas.
Yeah, it's still the gorillas, man. Jesus
It's not
Lord.
even. It's not even close. I think like two gorillas or three gorillas. Fucking hell, would probably be able to beat 100 gorilla-sized men. I don't think you understand. There was someone did they put it into one of the engines to recreate like how obviously the fight between one gorilla and 100 men, and like the gorilla was just fucking flinging everyone about, like grabbing them by the legs, flipping them around. Like people don't actually realize how strong gorillas are. Like if it was actually to happen, gorillas, unless they're obviously gorillas are very territorial, but they don't really look for conflict in that way unless you were literally like trying to kill them and they had to go berserk, so you injected a gorilla with adrenaline. I don't think it would fight 100 men. They'd probably just run away because that's just its natural instinct, right? But yeah, definitely not even close. People underestimate how strong fucking gorillas are. It's absolutely ridiculous. So like gorillas can deadlift like 2 times.
Yeah, something stupid like that. Yeah. I still think even I agree. Like if you sized someone,
1,800 pounds.
Jesus, man,
8 times stronger than a human male.
Yeah, like if you sized someone up to that size, yeah, they'd be significantly stronger. But I just don't think they would be as strong as a gorilla. Like they just are hefty fuckers.
I mean, if you consider like bone density, the shape of their skeleton as well, their upper bodies are so much bigger than their legs, and like for humans to get to that size, no agility, no mobility. Like, would you even be able to fight if you were that size? Do you know what I mean? Or you're just throwing wild haymakers? Like that, you know, they're built to carry more size, not the same way we are. Like when as a normal individual, say for example us, if we were to push up to 130, 140, 150 kilos, mate, we would have difficulties walking. I have difficulties walking now, and I'm 90 kilos. Do you know what I mean? Gorillas walk around at what, like 400 kilos, or like 300 kilos, and they don't have any issues walking. They're walking on fours. They're chilling. They could probably get bigger if they wanted to, or if they could.
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. Literally, yeah, I think it's still going down to the gorillas. Did we do biggest struggle we've had in bodybuilding? I think we did, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, we'll go for obtain a new McLaren or -2 inches on your midsection.
-2 inches on my midsection, easily.
Really?
Yeah, 100%, mate. If I had another -2 inches on my midsection, oh my god, that's a stupid question. I think it's different for me.
Bro. I'm going McLaren.
Yeah, different for me because I compete in classic, and obviously the size of your waist does matter. But yeah, really, you go with the McLaren?
Yeah, bro. Yeah, absolutely.
What would you do with it? Just drive it or sell it?
Nah, to be fair, I would probably. Well, I'm already getting a car at the minute. I'm just finalising it. It's quite a nice car, so I'll be pretty happy with that. So I probably would just sell the McLaren, or I'd be tempted to sell it, take half the cash, put that into a nice car, and then bank the other half. I do like a 50-50. But because of my shape, I'm not really classic. I'm not classic height at all as well. I'm too short. So open is pretty much the way to go. My midsection's fine. But I just don't think like it's fine. It's fine for open, which is kind of fine. Like I don't think I would get that much reward for having like a smaller midsection. If the question was wider clavicles, or add 2 inches to my clavicles, 100% I'm going for that because my upper body width is pretty shocking. But that's really it. Like structurally, I'm quite rectangular. I got a little bit of a V-taper, a little bit of an X-frame.
Yeah, you do. You're looking pretty fucking classic recently. I do say so myself.
It's
I'm getting quite intimidated now. My classic status is getting questioned.
I don't think the thing is, it's like I'm just, my front double is like fairly pleasing, but long term I just know that I would be more competitive in open long term because I just like if I was
titanically muscular.
I think not muscle. It's just height. Like my weight cap for classic would be like pretty much my body weight now, which is fucked. So if I want to carry enough tissue, like, because obviously the way that classic works is the taller you are. So the difference between like 5'8" to 5'9" is like £2, and the difference between 6 foot to 6'1" is like £10 in terms of like stage weight.
Yeah.
So because of the way that it is, like, it does reward you for being taller. I think it's like 6'1", 6'2" is kind of where you're best, and be 6'3". Open statistically 5'9", where I'm at. Like most people tend to do best. So, and then particularly because we see more open people who look like pleasing, like Andrew Jacked, etc. I think maybe I think I'll have a pleasing physique, but I just don't. I wouldn't give a shit about my midsection that much. But I think, yeah, my upper body, my clavicle width will hold me back. I definitely think so. Definitely. It's just not as naturally wide as other people's. Like, I've had to really focus on creating width, and even then it's like I don't really have width until I pose properly, until I do like a front double, and until I do like a lat spread. I don't really have too much width, and even then, like, I think I'm going to be quite dense long term because I just don't have a ton of width. But it is what it is. It is what it is. So I'll take the McLaren. I think what's average McLaren, like 200 grand. So I'll sell that.
Something like that.
I'll sell that. I'll buy a car for 100.
Like that.
I'll bank 100. Actually, nah, I don't know, because the car I'm looking at, I'm already pretty gassed with. So
that's what I mean. It is just money in the bank. Like,
yeah, I think I'd take it. I'd do one of two things. I would put it towards a house, or rogue, I'd put it in a pension. And
sorry?
Yeah. No. Put it in a pension. 40 years of accumulating wealth.
Oh, yeah.
200 grand. Bro, I'd retire like fucking. I'd be like, be retiring when I'm 40. I'd be like, they'd be like, what's your pension? I'd be like a couple mil or something stupid. I don't know. But yeah, I think, yeah, no, I'm taking the McLaren. If I can't sell it, I'll have it. Fine. But
fine, I'll speed everywhere.
But yeah, I would probably try and sell it. But yeah. We've got, well, Andy, I know you're not listening, but he always puts this in every single question box. He's put, who's your favorite client and why is it me? So I'm going to spin off the question. I'm going to say, what are 3 things that you look for in a successful client?
Oh, really good question. Okay. One is going to be communication. I think just, it doesn't have to be amazing, and it doesn't have to be like every single day, but it has to be consistent enough to facilitate, if there's a change that needs to be made. Or one big problem that I have with my clients is, like, they'll have a problem with either their training or the nutrition, and they won't tell me until I ask them. And that might not be until a couple of days or in the check-in or whatever. And I'm like, if you have this problem ongoing for, let's say, a week, why didn't you just come to me as soon as it happened? It's almost as if my clients are scared to use my time. So that's, I think, one of the main ones is going to be communication.
Yeah.
The other one is going to be probably, God, it's a really good question. I think execution, in terms of them doing what you're telling them to do, right? I wouldn't say telling, but suggesting. It's very much, as a coach, suggesting, not telling them what to do. And you have to be on a certain level of, like, the same playing field, right? So as a coach, if I'm like, okay, no, we're going to try this, and then they don't try it, and they come back to me and they're like, oh, we're stumped, and I'm like, oh, well, but you didn't try what I told you to try, stuff like that. So if they're not executing what we're communicatively agreeing on, I'm not going to tell my client, oh, you need to run like 5-day split, but making them do things that they don't want to do. But if we both sat down and be like, okay, no, you're struggling to grow your arms, I think running a 3-day split, doing full body, just to increase the frequency of how often we hit our arms, is a good idea. And they're like, yeah, cool, mint. And then we run it. But some clients will just like ghost you, they won't run it, and then they'll keep on complaining that they're not getting the progress that they're getting. So I think execution, communication, and probably something to do with check-ins. I've had clients who you know, they just won't fill in check-ins at all, or they'll be like, they'll give me half of the information that I need to do, and they'll question, like, a big one for me with my clients was like, oh, why are we tracking, you know, my sleep, or why are we tracking, you know, how much I'm enjoying my sessions, like the green boxes, right? And I'm like, arguably, I think that's one of the most important things because of the biopsychosocial model, how much of an influence your psychology and your sociology has on your physical well-being, one. But two, I know how much my psychological and sociological well-being has on my bodybuilding. The times I've been the most consistent, you know, the most relaxed, etc., etc., are the times where I make the most progress in the gym. So tracking that and being able to you know, influence their psychology and the sociology is ultimately going to get them more gains. And I could sit here and, you know, talk about how much of an influence your psychology has on, you know, parasympathetic activity, allowing you to actually de-stress. Cortisol is naturally catabolic, so being in a state of parasympathetic actually is more anabolic. That's when you rest and you actually recover, one, but two, you actually build muscle as well. So, you know, if you're not able to get into that parasympathetic because of cortisol, because of stress, because of X, Y, and Z factors, that needs to be tracked.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think I would say the key things I look for in a client, always communication, 100%, because you only know what people are telling you. And if you don't know everything, then you're an unreliable decision maker if you don't know everything, which is not cool. We don't like that. The next thing I would say is self-aware. I hesitated from saying driven because I think those things can come at a cost. I think you can drive and passion and want to do something is good, but I think that it can become an issue when people get impatient or they start doing too much or they start to stress themselves out, like unwillingness to have untracked meals in an off season, doing excessive volume in a diet, doing excessive cardio, just not eating meals because they're just driven. So I'd say like self-awareness, because I think if you're very self-aware, again, it can go either way. It's very hard to describe what I mean, but self-awareness in the regard of like, you're like, okay, I want to prep because I want to get on stage. And your self-awareness is like, I'm going to follow the plan and I understand that I want to do more, but I also understand that that's not a good idea. And I understand that I am tired, but I understand that that's part of the process. Do you know what I mean? Like, just good balanced understanding of things. I think it's very easy to, like, when you're very, very passionate and driven, maybe like passion with self-awareness. I think that's the biggest thing. Like at the minute where I am, I'm about 16 weeks out and I'm kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I don't feel bad at all. I feel great. I feel like I'm in an off season. I'm not hungry. I want to do more. And I'm like pulling myself back all the time. And it's like that temptation to do more. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm bang on timeline. It's all good. Like, I will be peeled. And I kind of just need that self-awareness of like, you're telling yourself you're in prep. So you're like, I should feel like I'm at the back end of prep. And most of prep does not feel like the back end of prep. So I kind of need to like slow myself down. That self-awareness of like, hey, I'm 16 weeks out. Yeah, you're in prep, but you're 16 weeks out. Calm down. You shouldn't be peeled right now. If you were peeled, that'd be an issue. If you were peeled, you need to do an earlier show, like, because you can't hold this for 16 weeks. So again, I think self-awareness with drive. So communication, a driven self-awareness. And I think the third thing would be, I think just kind of general positivity or just the ability to have a laugh. Like, if you can have a laugh with your coach and you can kind of make the communication fun, I think that's pretty important. I think I've coached some people where it's like, I'm almost their boss, but like, they're like, yes, hello, this week has been ideal. Here are my actions. This is how I feel about this. It's just very like put together. And I think sometimes just a message coming in and being like, mate, this was a fucking good week. And I'll be like, beautiful, you stud, crack on. Like, even a little bit of like a back and forth. I'd still say I'm a very professional coach, and like I'm like, you know, I have a laugh with people. I know they're like, I'm probably still like I'll use like fairly coachy language with people, but I like when people can have like a bit of a laugh, like coaching Dan through that prep. You know, we weren't like communicating like robots. Like he'd be like, I'd be like, I instead of being like, how do you feel? I'd be like, how fucked do you feel, mate? And he'd be like, yeah, pretty fucked. I'd be like, mint, good. I want you feeling fucked. Like just a little bit of communication of that. And then he'd be like, oh mate, I feel all right today. I'm a little bit panicked. And I'll be like, it'll be all right, mate. You'll feel crap tomorrow. You know, like just little jokes and shit like that, kind of get you through like those situations and scenarios. So I think an ability to like have a laugh is always good. Just, you know, like rather than making the coaching process very like clinical in a way and very like hospital. When you feel like you're, you know, a doctor with a patient, that's not really fun. You want to feel like a coach, you know.
Yeah, I think there's a sweet spot between being too laid back but also taking bodybuilding too seriously. At least I'm speaking from my own experience. You know, I'm a very, very serious bodybuilder. I take it very seriously, but at the same time, like I also understand how long I need to do this for. And if I don't enjoy the time I'm doing now, I'm not going to enjoy the end product. And it's very much the same for my clients. You know, you have there's this definition of like psychology behind rehab and injury between fear avoidant and fear confronters. So most people will fall into two different archetypes. They're either fear confronters or fear avoiders. Fear avoiders run into risk of doing too little because they're scared they're going to injure themselves again. And fear confronters runs the issue of doing too much because they want to get back to doing X, Y, and Z sooner, right? And it's very much the same thing with bodybuilding and what you said in terms of prep. You have to dose yourself. You know, you have to sometimes put a cork on the bottle, as per se, because you know you don't want to do too much. Like in your case specifically, but there are also clients where I'm like, you know, you need to pick it up a little bit because you don't want to do too little. And I think there's a sweet spot. You know, you have to have the self-awareness, like you said, and perspicacity to actually step back and look at the situation. And if you're in a situation when you can't do that, like in prep, that's why you need a coach who's got the head screwed on, and they can tell you, like, literally, look, like this, we've set this plan, just follow the fucking plan. Don't try and navigate your own way through this because you are not in a mental state right now to make accurate, educated decisions. Let me do that for you, you know? And people are almost scared to do that because you have to put a lot of trust into your coach and you have to really, really know what they're doing, or they need to know what they're doing. And, you know, there is a massive problem with coaches becoming, you know, because coaching has become much more popular nowadays and a lot more people are trying to do it. And there are people who are spreading, you know, not necessarily false information, but maybe a little bit miseducated and they're not doing things like conventionally. They might be telling them clients some bullshit or making promises they can't keep. And that's why it's so important to actually find a coach that knows what they're doing, one, from a client's perspective, but from a coaching's perspective, it's really important to demonstrate your ability as a coach, not just from the educational side, but your ability to communicate, your ability to actually be a human and be enjoyable. You know, one of the main things about my check-ins is like, you know, I still know my shit, but like I try and make a laugh. I try and, you know, like I like that impression of myself, you know, like starting my check-ins with random things, like calling phases like really funny names, just in order to just give it a little bit of oomph, you know, like we're here to do this for a long time, not for a short time. So we want to enjoy ourselves, you know. Don't try and make bodybuilding more serious than it needs to be, because bodybuilding in nature is a very serious sport. It's 24/7 dedication. There are so many variables that you can take a control of in order to facilitate, you know, growth and development. So don't make it any more serious than it needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think, again, it just comes down to having fun with the process. You know, I was talking to a mate yesterday about this. I was like, you know, bodybuilding's a short sport. Like, I've probably only got 10, 15 years left. Like, that's nuts, man. I'm a fucking baby. You know, like, I don't have 10, 15 years left of anything. Like, but already it's like, you know, every year of progress I make, I'm like, that was sick. But I'm also like, oh, I'm 10%, like I'm 10% closer to retirement. Fuck me, man. Like, you know, you've got a little bit of an element of the clock against you. And I think that's why you truly just have to like enjoy it and make the most of it and be like, this is not forever. Like, it can't be forever. The gym can be forever, but bodybuilding can't. And so, you know, you're going to have to do things that like suck a little bit. Like, you're never going to go far as a bodybuilder not doing shit that sucks. So you might as well have a laugh. you know, and it's like reminding myself right now where I'm like, is where I fucked up in that before. I'm like, oh man, I feel is what I want. Is shots where I want. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, then what am I complaining about? Oh, boo hoo, I feel good in prep. Okay, mate, cool. Like if I get to stage and I feel mint, I'll just do more shows. Like calm. Like can you imagine being like, oh Camille, mate, I'm really upset. I got stage lean and I feel mint. Like you'd be like, shut the fuck up, you know.
So what's wrong with you? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, but also I know that's not going to happen. Like I'm just not going to get all the way to stage and feel fucking fantastic. Like just won't happen. You know, there will be some suck, but you know, you kind of got to have a bit of a laugh.
That was so sus.
But like you got to have a laugh and you got to enjoy it, because you know, ultimately at the end of the day, like that is kind of the point. I think, like you said, people take bodybuilding very seriously, and you know, it all comes down to balance. Like in the gym, I'm not a fan of having a laugh. Like we are there to do some shit, but you know, you can have a laugh outside of it. You know, so yeah, I think
100%.
Yeah, man, definitely. People take shit too seriously.
One thing, I had a little conversation with one of my mates. I think it was like last week. That got me thinking a little bit, and it's because I went for a walk with one of my mates, and it was really sunny out, and I wore a tank top, and he saw me, and he was like, "Oh, why are you wearing a tank? Like, oh, do you think you're big? Like, why are you showing off your muscles?" And I had to think about it, and I was like, that was the first time I've ever wore a tank out in public when I'm not going to the gym in years, and it's like I'm only gonna be this big now today. Tomorrow I'm going to be bigger, and the day after that I'm going to be even bigger. Like, and I am proud of what I've developed. And people will categorize bodybuilders as self-centered, egotistical, all of this, but the same way a painter will take time and effort into making a beautiful painting, what do you think they're doing after that? It's going in a display, it might get sold and put in a fucking gallery, like the Mona Lisa, stuff like that. It's like, we are artists, it's just our canvas is our own body. And like for someone to say like, oh, why are you proud of what you achieved? Because I worked half a decade to build this physique. Of course I'm going to be proud of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't show that I'm egotistical. It doesn't show that, you know, I'm self-centered and all of this. I just have worked hard for something and I want to display it. It's just people attach these negative connotations to people who have big muscles because on average, let's say, people who have big muscles tend to be more cunts. Maybe the steroids, maybe not. But you know, you can't put everyone else in the same basket. And you know, like there's nothing wrong with being proud of what you've achieved. You know, if you have the confidence to put on a tank and go out in public, fucking do it. You worked so hard to achieve what you have achieved. You shouldn't ever feel guilty or sad or angry for doing that because you put the work in, you know?
Definitely, man. I think, you know, that I'm trying to myself kind of appreciate bodybuilding as something that is beautiful in that it's temporary. You know, like I am building a lot of muscle to inevitably have to pull it all off, which sucks to think about. But obviously I'm at the start, so it's like, well, relatively. But I've got a long way up before I then have to start pulling down. But you know, you can't maintain it forever. And so it's like, you know, like when you think about the cool shit you can do, like fucking enjoy it. Like it's fun to like walk into a gym and be like, I can kind of do some mad shit, man. Like I can do some shit I never thought I'd be able to. I can't even fathom it. I remember not fathoming, like I couldn't fathom 20 kilo dumbbells when I first started. There's not many things I can't do with a 20 kilo. Like, you know, I could probably take it for dinner in a movie, but you know, like it, and like that's the thing. It's like similar like muscle mass. It's like you really just have to enjoy it for what it is, and like, you know, try and make the most of it. And yeah, I think too many people make bodybuilding a thing that kind of traps them. And if bodybuilding turns into something that you feel held hostage by, it's not really for you. And I think again, that's one of the things that like people don't quite understand is they want to say they're a bodybuilder, but they don't want to actually be a bodybuilder, and that's fine. But just don't do it then. Like, you know, I view bodybuilding the same way that like I view tennis. in that like I don't really view tennis as like crazy impressive. So I don't think everyone should aspire to be a professional tennis player. The same way that like I don't think everyone should aspire to be a bodybuilder, but because it involves muscle mass, they get weird about it. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like,
yeah, it's an ego thing. It's a massive ego thing, and especially with men as well. Like our brains are wired to, you know, to seek competition, to seek like dominance, etc., etc. I mean, that's one of the main things testosterone does, and it's like, of course, people are going to feel intimidated if you're bigger than them, but like, it's your hobby, it's your passion. The same thing with fighting, right? It's all these like people who fight are getting onto bodybuilders, be like, oh yeah, you're 250 pounds, but I'd fuck you up in a fight. Yeah, you would, mate. You're trained martial artist. I'm a bodybuilder. You'd murk me. Yeah, it's your hobby compared to mine. Like, and I would murk you on a bodybuilding stage. Like, you come into my domain, obviously, I'm gonna murk you the same way I go to yours, and you're gonna murk me. There's absolutely no shame in admitting that, you know. Like, and people, like I said, people get attached to that whole ego thing, and it's like you have to learn to drop it every once in a while. You know me, I'm a very big advocate of having an ego in the gym, and I also do have a big ego in the gym. But at the same time, I've developed the ability to drop it when it needs to be dropped. And like today, mate, it was the first time I ever pressed 50s on the dumbbell. And we trained at the old our old gym in fuck knows where. We're not going to say it here, but yeah, I stepped in and I was like, I was warming up on the 40s, and I was like, literally throwing it up. I was like, oh, that's weird. Like that feels pretty light. And I was like, oh, for shits and gigs, let me just chuck up the 50s. And I got 5 reps, and I was like, I never ever imagined that 5 years ago, like when I was training at gym, I would move to 50s. I remember starting on like 22.5s and looking at the end of the rack and be like, I am never ever going to be able to move that. And for me to go back after half a decade and just fucking press the 50s, I literally, like, it is one of the most satisfying and rewarding feelings, because you reflect on it and you're like, I can literally remember the first time I ever stepped in the gym. I know exactly what emotions I experienced and how I felt about everything. And like my mindset and like my development as an actual individual has changed so much. And like, that's the beauty of bodybuilding. It's, you don't just develop as a bodybuilder, you develop as a person. The skills and the mindset that you develop through bodybuilding is completely applicable to all areas of your life, your relationship, your financial status, business, all of these aspects. You know, the foundation of bodybuilding is delayed gratification, it's discipline, it's being able to do shit that you have to do but you don't want to do, and you do it anyway. And there's like one of the main like characteristics that are displayed in highly successful people, you know. And a lot of bodybuilders are also very highly successful, whether they're, you know, through brand sponsorships or etc., but also through like coaching and businesses, you know, opening gyms, etc. It's just like the results speak for itself, you know.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think we will wrap up on that. I want to do more Q&As. So I think they spark good conversation. We also need to get some fucking guests going as well. So I'll have a little sort of that this week.
I'll have a look.
Yeah. Yeah, to be fair, man, if you got some connection, pull some strings.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And if you guys want anyone on or have any questions, let us know. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Jack_Archer Academy. He's been Camille_Archer Academy. Give the podcast a look up on Spotify, YouTube, all that stuff. Find us on Instagram. Clothing is
oh my god.
Clothing. I've cornered myself a little bit. Clothing will not be Built Not Born. Clothing will be through Archer Academy, and that's all I'll say. It's in the works. I'll talk to you briefly. I've got a call in 8 minutes. I'll talk to you briefly after recording.
First reaction is just
to the rest of, to the rest of you, thank you so much for listening. Have a good one. See ya. Bye.